mandate is still on the table for the Carney government, and it's going to likely cause massive problems within our own industry. Hello, I'm Adrienne Batra. With me are Brian Lilly and Warren Kinsella. This is a half-baked idea. The Carney Liberals still have this notion of an electric vehicle mandate. Perhaps we should go back a little bit, Brian, tell people what exactly it is that they're looking for and why it's very problematic.
The plan is to mandate that by next year, 20% of all passenger vehicles sold in Canada must be zero emissions vehicle. That means battery electric vehicles. This is something that the industry, and then it will increase every year. The percentage that must be zero emission vehicles, it will increase every year until 2035, when all internal combustion engines, gas or diesel, will be banned. You can buy an old used one, but you won't be able to buy a new one. Look, I get the need for EVs. I think there is a growing market. I am not one of these people that says these things will never work. I see the Bright Drop trucks with FedEx and Purolator around me all the time. It's a great use for them. But EVs aren't good for every instance, especially in a cold country like Canada. So the industry has been telling the government for some time, going back to when Trudeau was in charge. This is a Trudeau idea that the Carney Liberals are keeping. They've been saying this is not feasible. You need to slow down. Well, there was a motion before the House of Commons this week from the Conservatives calling on the government to pull back. It was voted down. You've got to remember that there was a similar mandate in the United States. Donald Trump got rid of that. The whole car industry is now pivoting, given the new climate in the United States. Sure, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, is still pushing this, but that's about it. So let the EV market grow naturally. I'll give you a quick stat before you bring in Warren. Quebec got rid of their EV rebate. People are only buying these things if they have a rebate. When Ontario got rid of its rebate, because there's no EVs made in Ontario except those Bright Truck delivery trucks. When Ontario got rid of its rebate, where you're basically paying people to buy the electric vehicle, sales dropped off. Quebec got rid of one for 1/4 at the beginning of this year, and sales dropped off dramatically. Half of all EVs on the road in Canada are in Quebec, and they won't even buy them without a government subsidy. So this is a horrible idea. We're going to have to be subsidizing people to buy cars that they otherwise don't want.
Warren, it's an important point about what, as Canada, we're trying to grow our economy. We're trying to, I guess we're not elbows up anymore. That ship has sailed. But the United States is fundamentally reshaping their economy through all means, by opening up their natural resources, by eliminating red tape. But they're doing things that are just fundamentally changing their economy. One of these things was to eliminate the EV mandate. Canada is going in the opposite direction, it would seem, in this particular instance. And I'm wondering, what's the thinking here other than perhaps purely ideologically driven?
They're fighting the last war. That's what the problem is. Like the numbers don't lie. The bottom has fallen out of the EV market. And it's not just because of Elon Musk's association with the Trump administration, this paradox of him selling EVs to liberals when liberals are really mad at him. It's not, for sure, Tesla's in some trouble, but so is the EV market generally, for a number of reasons. One of which is they're way more expensive than cars propelled by internal combustion engines, because there are fewer and fewer places where you can get recharged, because people have anxiety about being recharged. And then you have people like me who live outside cities. I live in rural Canada, and I can tell you guys, there ain't no recharging station anywhere near me. It's not going to work. So nice idea, but bad execution. So and that's why I think we editorially at our paper had a problem with some of the EV battery investment that governments of all stripes at all levels were making. It's like, are you guys really thinking this through? Why do you think that the market is going to be there forever for this type of vehicle, unless you're planning on artificially creating a market? And that's my
That's right.
concern about Canada, is that what looks like what we're doing in the face of what every other country in the world is doing, which is saying, maybe not yet.
Well, to that point, Brian, that Warren was making, the Biden administration attempted to do that. They had put billions of dollars in some infrastructure bill to get those charging stations. I think they built maybe 5, which is astonishing considering the amount of money. Canada, not good stewards, the Canadian government's not good stewards of the public purse. The concern would be that not only would they have to bring in a subsidy again, a federal subsidy, but also building the infrastructure for those charging stations and what it's not reasonable.
The federal subsidy is there. As I said, Quebec had one. It was put on hold and immediately sales plummeted. BC still has one. Ontario doesn't. I don't think the rest of the country. Well, one, they don't matter in terms of numbers. They're just not big enough. But also, they're not driving the sales. But you're right on that point about the number of charging stations. We have about 10% of what we would need to completely switch over. Now, let's say we built the extra charging stations. Do we have a power grid that can support this? Mm-hmm. Absolutely not. And I live in a condo building that's about 35 to 40 years old. We don't have the infrastructure in this building to let everyone have their own charging station in their parking lots. And yes, I own a car. I'm a downtown Toronto lad. I sipping elitist. I eat sushi. I'm everything that people say.
He admits it.
Yes.
He admits it.
But you couldn't put a charging station in my building. Right. And so you've got to have these public ones. But even if you build them, we don't have the electricity capacity. We'd have to expand that dramatically. We'd have to be building nuke plants all over. We're putting the cart before the horse. You must drive an electric vehicle, but you will not be able to charge it because we don't have the infrastructure or the electricity to make your car go vroom vroom.
Well, and Warren, final point to you. Never mind that infrastructure piece, which is very significant and important.
Yeah, just never mind.
Just never mind that. But even the components that are required now to build electronic vehicles, these are scarce resources, and sometimes these components have to come from unfriendly parts of the world. And so there's that aspect of it too. And but overall, it just strikes me as very bizarre that the Liberals the Carney Liberals are taking this, hangover from the Trudeau Liberals and really running with it.
Yeah, and well, I think that's because while we have a new prime minister, we got a prime minister surrounded by a lot of people who've been there for a long, long time, who cling to old ideas. My understanding is there's a big staff shakeup taking place in the next few days. That's probably a good thing. Stephen Harper did that when he took over his party, and obviously he benefited from that. So I think there's going to be some changes, at least at the staff level. But you're absolutely right. They do still cling to a lot of old ideas. They keep fighting the old war. And again, like both of you have said, EVs are nice, but in order to execute a change of that magnitude, that is like not just an economic change, that's a cultural change. It requires some planning, it requires some thought, and it requires buy-in from the public. You can't just impose a battery plant on them and expect they're all going to run out and buy EVs. Right. You got to make the case for it, and they've not done that. And that's why guys like me are sticking with my Jeep.
Well, this electronic vehicle mandate in Canada is foolhardy, yet the Liberals are plowing ahead.